Meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education. This is our regular meeting on this Tuesday, May the 2nd. Charlotte, may you please call the roll?
Dr. Chang?
Present.
Mr. Goldman?
Here.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Dr. Kamoff?
Here.
Ms. Nazarella?
Present.
Dr. Steinberg?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Here.
Student Representative Megan Murphy?
Here.
Student Representative Caitlin Striffcave.
A student who is excused. Thank you. Megan, may you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order. We now will proceed to the superintendent's presentation, where we'll receive the presentation of the finalist for the West Hartford Board of Education Teacher of the Year. Passing it off to our new superintendent, Paul Vicinas.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And it is my privilege to be here before you today, and as my first act as acting superintendent, to be able to recognize the outstanding educators that are with us who represent our 2023 Teacher of the Year finalists. I'll be calling them up momentarily, but I wanted to first just take an opportunity to describe the process. I know our board got to hear this, but for everyone that is involved, the Teacher of the Year program is a process that is entirely teacher-driven, teacher-led. It is rigorous. It begins with nominations from their colleagues, specifically from teachers. And the nominees, if they accept, will submit a resume. They will write an essay. And then they will also submit recommendation letters from parents, from colleagues, from supervisors, and a person of their choice. They will be visited, have a lesson videotaped, which will then be watched by the entire Teacher of the Year committee. And as the process progresses, the pool of outstanding educators is narrowed to 3. They are then formally interviewed by a Teacher of the Year committee. And the recipient of Teacher of the Year for West Hartford remains embargoed under lock and key, secret from everyone, until May the 19th, in which case they will be formally recognized. But it is a genuine privilege and pleasure, and I would ask if I can call forward, and I'm doing this in alphabetical order by last name, be there any doubts, if I can have Mr. Eric Feeney, Dylan Geisler, and Emily McMurray please come forward and just be recognized. And let's begin with a round of applause. All right, I'm going to ask you to stand there uncomfortably while I say a few things about each of you and present each of you with a certificate recognizing your position as a finalist. So I'll start with you, Mr. Feeney, Eric Feeney, or he's sometimes known simply as Feeney, which I think is a throwback to his military experience. Since August of 2013, Eric has been an elementary teacher at Wolcott Elementary. He currently teaches 3rd grade, but he has taught 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. Eric's received a 6th-year degree in Administration and Supervision from the University of Bridgeport, a Master's of Education from the University of Bridgeport, and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Southern Connecticut State University. Scott Dunn, his principal, has said, "You cannot find a person with a bigger heart." And I think that is evidenced by accomplishments such as his being named at one of Hartford's finest for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in 2020. Honorees who show exemplary leadership, are active in their communities, and have excelled in their profession or business are so recognized. He's also an honoree of the St. Patrick's Day Parade here in West Hartford, as named by the West Hartford Committee in 2023, for passionately serving the community, demonstrated by his commitment to helping nonprofit organizations. Eric is said to be someone by his colleagues who clears paths by removing barriers, and he is also a culture catalyst. This is evidenced by his involvement in the Future of Education Technology Conference, where he was a national presenter, presenting Bringing Assistive Technology to the General Ed Classroom. He demonstrates immeasurable pride in Wolcott and has a cheerleader demeanor. He's been a member of the Welcoming Schools Committee, a community organizer, organizing October's Global Cardboard Challenge in collaboration with Elmwood Makerspace. Mr. Feeney's reputation at Wolcott is almost a cult of personality. He's incredibly well known, beloved, and engaged well beyond the classroom. So to borrow from your own turn of phrase, I hope we can all be counted as friends of Feeney. Next, Dylan Geisler, who is affectionately known as Mr. G. Since August of 2013, Dylan has taught physical education at numerous schools throughout the district. He is currently proud to teach at Smith STEM Elementary. He has a Master's of Education in Physical Education with a concentration in Adventure Education from Plymouth State University and a Bachelor of Science in Physical Education from Central Connecticut State University. Teresa Giolito, his principal, describes Dylan as our resident rock star. Dylan knows every student, and every student knows Dylan. He is a mainstay at STEAM PM doing cardio drumming, and he's also been part of, correct me if I'm wrong, the Wolcott Elementary Running Club. His colleagues describe the trusting and meaningful relationships that he builds with families and how well he's known in the parent community. He's a regular at the Smith STEM community, or organized the Smith STEM Community Paint Night. He participates in townwide cross-country runs, and he developed a parent play night where he created a language-free environment by mixing teams of English and non-English speaking parents, bringing them together, making a connection through play and sport, games like Can Jam and Cornhole. Dylan is a presence on the campus, but colleagues will say he doesn't want the attention on himself. He's a relationship builder and a true collaborator. He's been involved in collaborative inquiry teams incorporating movement and brain breaks in the classroom and fitness at home as a family engagement strategy. Dylan, you may not want the attention, but as the resident rock star, we applaud your greatest hits, and we hope you'll take a bow. And third but not last, Emily McMurray, affectionately known as the McMurray.
It's true.
From not the right. Since August of 2012, Emily has been an elementary school teacher at Whiting Lane in Norfolk, but since 2016, she has graced the pre-K at Charter Oak International Academy. She has a Master of Arts in Early Childhood and Early Childhood Special Education from the University of St. Joseph and a Bachelor of Science in Early Childhood Development from East Tennessee State University. According to the Charter Oak leadership, the relationship that Emily forms with students and families is simply unparalleled. They describe her classroom as magical and say that her greatest strength is the personalization of instruction. Emily creates a culturally responsive environment in which family experience and culture is reflected in the physical surrounding of the pre-K classroom. Her instruction supports student voice, and she has developed a shared protocol for student voice in the early childhood classroom that has been shared nationally. This is evidenced by her being a district representative at the National Conference for the Education of Young Children, being a State of Connecticut Executive Functioning Focus Group member, and being featured in Edutopia videos showcasing early childhood best practices. Emily is described as the perfect pick for student and families as they begin their educational careers. Her reputation for excellence has earned her nomination on the Professional Learning and Evaluation Committee, and her collaboration and teamwork are dramatic assets in her work as a collaborative inquiry team facilitator and member of the Early Childhood Curriculum Review Team. Emily incorporates the Charter Oak International Academy theme of global citizenship and the district focus on social justice into pre-K by asking her students how they can make a difference. Without question, she has made a difference in our district, our school community, and the lives of the children that she inspires every day. Congratulations, Emily. Let's have another round of applause for all three of our finalists.
All right, boy, what a wonderful and meaningful way to start the meeting off. So Eric, Dylan, and Emily, again, congratulations to you. You make us all so very proud. Thank you so much for your tireless dedication to educating our young people. As we continue on with the agenda, we now are where we will have our public communications. This is where we receive comments from you, your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions. Each individual is allowed 3 minutes to speak. We ask when you come to the podium to please share your name and your town of residence. Please be mindful of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time has expired, you will see a red card. We ask for you to please close your comments and respectfully take your seat at that time. We are attentively listening to you as board members. However, it is policy that we do not respond to comments as they are being made. We also start off with public comments from those that are speaking on agenda items first, and we have a list here offering that opportunity. And if there is no one who has signed up for an agenda item, then we do open it up for general comments. So on the list for agenda items, and just to remind us all what today's agenda items are, they are recommended 2023-2024 budget revisions, the PPR report, state metrics, and approval of the financial report. So although no one signed up on this list, I still will ask anyone in the audience here who would like to speak on an agenda item. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an agenda item? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to general comments, and we do have a list here. And as I read those names on the list, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. The first name we have, I believe, is Mike, last initial R, I believe. Mike. Yes. Are you Mike? Or yes. Okay, please, yes, come to the podium. Please say your name as it should be said and your town of residence. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Rohrbach. I'm a West Hartford town resident of 23 years. I'm here tonight to speak on parents' rights. I believe historically parents have had a little notice about changes to curriculum in the district. The board seems to be somewhat ignorant of what curriculum is actually being taught, and unfortunately parents are definitely unaware of it. A good example of this was the rollout of the elementary gender curriculum, where parents were blindsided about the new materials that elementary school students were going to use. Parents have a right and an obligation to know what their children are being taught in school, especially when such controversial topics are being introduced to 5-year-olds. These 5-year-olds, most of which believe in things like unicorns, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and etc. I would like to see a committee formed that reviews any new curriculum coming into the district. The committee should include administrators, teachers, parents, and board members. Transparency is paramount to a good working school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cameron Batchelder.
Hello, I'm Cameron Batchelder and I live in West Hartford. I'd like to talk about the impacts math has on education, music. Although Bach wasn't a formally trained mathematician, his music is very mathematical and always syncopated, tending to use 16th, eighth quarter, half, and whole notes instead of triplets and such. Einstein was an accomplished musician, and it's no wonder that Bach was one of his favorite composers. But the math becomes really great when you get to jazz. Sometimes where you hear 2 notes, you might find another part playing 3 in the same span. This is known as 3 against 2. And to properly do that, you can find the least common multiple of it and distribute them evenly. Fractions are also important. Sometimes notes are held for 2/3 of a beat. You can change a song into make it have a swing if you hold the first eighth note of a beat to 2/3 of a quarter note and the second eighth note for 1/3. But music is also important with history and rhythm. In European music, the emphasis is on the first and third beats, more on the first. While in African and American music, the emphasis is on 2 and 4. Jazz is a good example of this. If you listen to a march like Stars and Stripes Forever, the main beats are on 1 and 3, but that changes if you, for example, listen to the cadence that Mr. Vicinius performed last Veterans Day at my school, the hard work cadence. The cadence itself has louder clapping on the first and third beats, while the leader sings on the second and fourth beats prominently, a counterpoint to the cadence itself. It could be connecting cultures too, like us. People need this music teacher position you are eliminating, which will do away with music clubs and special needs classes and reduce opportunities to study music. But music is so important. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dean Batchelder.
Hi, my name is Dean Batchelder. I'm also in West Hartford. Live very close to him. My son is in the 5th grade. Next year he'll attend Sedgwick. Why then am I so invested in an issue that doesn't really have a direct impact on my family? It's because I am invested in my community. I'm invested in my school. I'm advocating for the students who will remain at the school and in elementary schools. Currently, Mr. Luongo comes in early, at least 2 days a week, to allow for rehearsals. He also gives up free periods to allow the performance group, the Woolcats, to practice. All music teachers are giving over 100%. What happens when that is spread thinner? Something has to give, and I'm afraid that's at a loss for the students. I know there's been an increase in available funds for the Board of Education's budget, and I know you probably already accounted for it. But maybe if we can rethink that, or maybe if we simply, raise the pay for play family cap to $500 per family instead of $400, maybe then a little more will be realized. please consider continuing the funding for the 10.5 teaching positions currently in our 11 schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Stella Werglow.
Hi, my name is Stella and I live in West Hartford. I go to Wolcott and my music teacher, next year he might be, instead of a full week at Wolcott, one day he might be not here, and that will change his schedule a lot because his schedule is very busy. And my dad can pass one out to you if you want to see it. Okay. And it's very busy, so if he leaves, it might change a lot about Wolcott, and I'm sure all the students at Wolcott really don't want that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? I see a hand. Was that a hand raised? Is that a hand raised there? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw a hand raised. Would anyone else like to make a comment? All right. We will pause on public communications and continue on now to non-staff communications and reports. We'll receive our updates from student board representatives. So beginning with Caitlin talking about Conard. Oh, I did it again. Megan talking about Conard.
It's okay. Good evening, everyone. So I have a few updates from last week and a few exciting things coming up. Starting with last Thursday, we had an ice cream social for Unified Theater, and I know a lot of people went. It was a great event for everyone to be together as their performance at the end of the year comes up. So very exciting with our Unified Theater program. Also last Friday, we had the Broadway concert. All of our choir groups performed. There were both solos highlighting a lot of students and group performances, and they get to wear fun outfits and everything, and I went, and it was just amazing. Like, there was so much talent, and it was just amazing to watch. Also last week, one of our teachers from Reach, Miss Taft, she had a Week of Speakers event where she had a few guest speakers come in. Some of those were Gus Marks Hamilton from the ACLU campaign manager, Corey Betts, who is president of the Hartford NAACP branch, Jake Joseph, who is a worker in the Anti-Defamation League, and lastly, Lori Ledone, who is a founder of Ledone Music. And so that was a really great opportunity for all of our students to go watch and listen to what they had to say about all of their respective places. Also this past weekend there was the Unified Sports Elementary Day, which was held at Conard. There were a lot of Conard student volunteers who helped out with that, and I think some of the elementary schools were Duffy, Whiting, Lane, Norfolk, and Wolcott, who all attended that, so that was great. Also, one of our seniors at Conard, Afaf Alber, won the West Hartford Women's History Month essay contest, which was put on by our state representatives. So amazing job to her. And then lastly, coming up May 6th, which is a Saturday at the Bushnell, West Hartford Public Schools will be represented at the Open Choice Spring Family Festival. And that's at Bushnell Park. Conard and a few other schools from West Hartford Public Schools will be there. And Principal Hines shared with me that cornhole will be the featured activity that kids can play while their families talk to whoever's there from West Hartford Public Schools about what they can find in our town. So just a few exciting things.
Lots of exciting things. Thank you so much, Megan. And I am imagining that wonderful things are happening at Hall as well. And so with that, we will continue on to unfinished business, which we do not have any of. Now moving on to new business, where we have a recommendation regarding the 2023-2024 budget revisions. And that recommendation is that the Board of Education adopt a revised 2023-2024 budget of $191,121 by making the following increase to the previously adopted 2023-2024 Board of Education budget. And the suggested increase is for $66,441 for increase out-of-district tuition appropriations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari. Discussion. So before we begin with the discussion, thank you so much, Liz, for joining us here. We know that from when we first voted on the budget, it's been quite an eventful time period. We know, first off, want to acknowledge how we have received lots of comments and suggestions from the community regarding the music department, and we appreciate that feedback. We appreciate hearing the impassioned voices, both young and old, regarding the music department. So thank all of you who have been speaking, whether it be here at the podium or via email. All right, and electronically, however it may be, we thank you. We also know that with many changes that we have come to learn since us voting, is that there has been a shortfall with respect to excess cost grant funding in the amount of about $700,000. So it's important for us to understand different pieces that have happened from then until now. And with that, I'm going to ask our acting superintendent, Mr. Lycinas, please share.
Certainly. Thank you. I want to begin with an acknowledgement of the fact that we have had a dramatic outpouring from our community in support of our music program, which is certainly no mystery to us. We recognize that our music program is really second to none, award-winning nationally, and it is something that within our budget process we do seek to preserve and protect, despite the fact that we did have and continue to recommend for a planned reduction in staffing of a 1.0 FTE in the instrumental music. I know that we've had and have here this evening a number of folks from our Wolcott community specifically, where we have the greatest participation. It's an exceptional program, and I can't say enough positive things about Mr. Dan Luongo. He does everything that has been said in terms of going the extra mile for children. But this planned reduction that we have talked about does not rest solely at Wolcott Elementary, and it is in response to a longer-term trend of approximately 300 fewer students from 10 years prior. And in that same time, we haven't, off the top of my head, we haven't made any other adjustments to the FTEs. Normally, what we would attempt to do, unless the financial situation were dire, is if we have a planned reduction or even a half measure, rather than force a cut of a half of a teacher, which could then cascade in terms of who would be displaced where, we wait until there might be someone who's leaving from retirement or for a different opportunity, which is the situation we find ourselves in. That said, we do have an excess of funding that has been very graciously provided us by the town council. And that excess is, as you mentioned, Madam Chairperson, about $67,000, just shy of that figure. And that really came as a result of the town's recognition of a dramatic shortfall that we saw after the Board of Education adopted a budget, after our last board meeting, in fact, in late April, when the state of Connecticut let all districts across the state know that they were going to be unable to fund the excess cost grant to the levels that they had provided. We were in a tier where we had budgeted for this current year and are budgeting for next year at an 85% reimbursement. And that's an 85% reimbursement despite the fact that the state statute indicates that all districts are expected to get, deserving to get 100% reimbursement for excess costs as they relate to specialized needs for students in any case where the expenditure on the part of the district is greater than 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure. Our reduction was from 85% down to slightly less than 74%, and as you mentioned, created a $700,000 shortfall in the current year's budget and is projected to have a significant shortfall for next year that we are working to ensure that we can cover. And thus, it is the recommendation that we apply that $67,000 to that to that fund in order to support, and what we're talking about are generally where the excess costs come from are from student outplacements, which are for students that have, they generally fit into three categories. They could be significantly medically fragile and require a specialized educational setting in that way. They could have significant emotional concerns and have a therapeutic placement. And there's a third instance that has slipped my mind for the moment, but we're talking at the end of the day about very costly educational programming that is 100% appropriate for our students, 100% deserved, and statutorily required. So knowing that there is an appropriation cap on the part of the state of Connecticut and that excess cost grant is flat funded, we do anticipate that's going to continue to be a driver and a need. And despite the fact that we do have dramatic support and interest to look in other areas of our budget to include the music program, the most responsible thing for us to do in terms of this allocation, in my opinion, would be to put it forward towards the special education outplacement funding, the tuition basis. And I would commit that we are working closely to ensure that we have as minimal an impact. We do have, as we've said, significantly fewer students in that than we had from our baseline when we established the 10.5 FTEs. And I think, as we've presented in the past, there will be, I can't stand here and say there will be no impact, but the impact to the average group size under this staffing model will change next year from 3.5 to approximately 3.9. It is a concession. I do recognize and I thoroughly value the work that's being done by our very dedicated instrumental teachers in the building, but the needs that we will face for the outplacements and an equally deserving and statutorily required program for other students in this regard is more significant.
Thank you very much for that overview. And with that, teammates, questions or comments you may have? Again, we are in the midst of discussion regarding a motion that is on the floor.
I just want to clarify. So the 66,000 was specifically, that was all that was needed for the specialized needs program?
66,000, certainly not all that is needed. 66,000 is the amount that the town council approved above and beyond what you sent forward to them. So they've granted 66,000 and change above what was requested by the Board of Education based on a surplus that they had available to them.
And that will meet the statutory need, the statutory requirement?
We will meet the statutory need. We've been able to meet that need, the shortfall this year, through pulling from, and you'll hear a lot more about this later in the evening when Liz presents her financial report, but we will able to meet the shortfall that we have this current year by looking at reserves and by pulling a fair amount from reserves that are specific to tuition reimbursement costs for special education from out-of-district partners, and we are already working to ensure that we can adjust our requirements and ensure that we meet the statute, any shortfalls that we might face next year with an anticipated shortage of funding from the state. We don't know. The state has, provided us what will the funding be next year. The state has said, well, it will be 85%. What we're saying is we don't necessarily have confidence that that will be the case.
So I didn't think the state had passed their budget. Had they passed?
So they have not passed their budget yet. What has come out of the Appropriations Committee is flat funding for this grant as a whole. So we've already been notified of our amounts that we are receiving this year, thus the 700,000 shortfall. Because the entire grant is being proposed as flat funded for the upcoming school year, it certainly seems likely that our shortfall will be approximately the same amount, if not more. But no, there is still time should
Well, no, I understand.
Yep,
You only
should
can deal
change
with the
for me.
data you have, but I
Yep.
didn't think it was a done deal for the.
It is not. It is still being debated.
Okay, all right. And I assume the amount will go up next year anyways.
That would be my assumption, yes.
Thank you.
Gail?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this, and you're saying that we have a $700,000 shortfall in the budget, that we're pulling money from other reserves to cover? Is that correct?
So in the current year, we do, and certainly when we go over the financial report a little bit later, we can get into more detail about it, but the large items that we have been able to utilize in order to cover that shortfall, you may recall at the last meeting, I described a McKinney-Vento grant for transportation of $100,000. So that will save $100,000 for us this year. In addition, we have an education services tuition reserve. These are funds that we receive for students that we educate who have a nexus or who live in a town other than West Hartford. And we have been providing those services for years, and over the years we have built up a reserve. So we are going to use some of that reserve in order to meet our shortfall this year. In addition, we are, prioritizing, limiting spending, and doing everything we can to ensure that we come in at budget.
So we didn't really increase the budget from when it was voted on here. We just simply could find $700,000 to cover that expense.
Well, it wasn't just that we found 700,000. We had to certainly analyze our spending, determine what resources we had available to us, because getting that type of news around May 1st with 2 months of the year is very difficult to manage. So, we were able to use this reserve to cover it. Should expenses come in higher, I will have to look over the next 2 months to see what else we can do without.
Okay, thanks.
Claire, yes.
Yeah, so if you can help me understand the excess costs. So if a child cannot be educated within the district because of medical needs or behavior, then whatever that private institution that gives them the education, that we have to go 4 times over what a typical student would need. And then that extra after, we're asking for 85% reimbursement, correct?
So it's 4.5 times, so it's about 90,000. So any costs that we incur in excess of 90,000 per pupil by state statute should be reimbursed to the district. The state's overall appropriation is capped, so they had indicated that they were going to give us 85%. They actually passed legislation in February detailing out the tiers of how much reimbursement every municipality would get. When they actually gathered all the costs and reported out to all of the districts the amount they would actually be getting in order to stay within their cap, our percentage was 74%.
Okay, so with that, I'm assuming this is a statewide or nationwide issue, that the costs of these private outplacements are going up because of lack of staff and higher salaries, and so in general, it's being hit in every district.
That's correct.
It's
It's
100%, yeah.
Yeah, it's hitting every district, at least in Connecticut. I'm not sure nationally. But it's a combination of the number of students that are outplaced, the overall costs of that, and a state funding level that has remained flat.
And are there people helping the state to understand that this is globally happening, happening throughout the
Absolutely.
state?
This is a conversation that's ongoing. I've been, by virtue of I've had audience this year with the Commissioner of Education, and this has been a topic that's brought up. It's discussed at the superintendent's level. It's discussed at a legislative level. So this is a very well-known issue, and something that, systemically does need to be addressed at a state level. A little bit later on, when I give my presentation, we'll talk about, I'll give you a very quick synopsis of some of the things that we're looking to do and that are already underway here in the district in terms of how we can do our best to control costs and balance our requirement to support students.
So, because of the reputation of West Hartford, we tend to draw many families at times for the special education program. Are we equal in the percentage of students with special needs that need outplacement to other major towns or towns in our DIRG?
To be honest, I don't have those statistics, but even if we were not, even if we were lower, even if we were higher, we do have a requirement, both legally and morally, of course. And so I think that, your question gets to a point of the need for greater systemic change in order to support all our students in the state. But I would never, in the same way that I want to be able to support and protect the strength of our music programming, I wouldn't want any family whose child needs more than another's to feel that was in any way, shape, or form burdensome. So and I know that's not your intent at all. I just want to put that out there for the audience that this is a requirement for us in terms of our educational mission. It has been a point and continues to be a point of pride for the quality of services that we are able to provide. But we will have students for whom, despite all of the outstanding programs and services that we can deliver in-house, that at times there may be temporary need or long-term need for a different educational setting. And when those occur, we support that placement, we find the correct placement, and we leverage the systems that are available to us in terms of being able to finance that.
And if I may say to your questions, and as you referenced, Paul, with this being not just a local challenge issue, a statewide issue, as we know, legislatively speaking, there is House Bill, I believe it's 5003, which is touching on this, which recognizes a need to make some changes so where there is more of an equitable reimbursement to municipalities when it comes to their budgets. Reimbursement, rather. Other questions or comments, teammates? Yes, Gail.
I just want to make one comment, and I don't mean this in any way disrespectfully, but I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the fact that we can find $700,000, that's sort of, for lack of a better term, lying around. I'm not saying it is, but then when we want to fund a music position, we can't find those funds. So $700,000 is a lot of money, and it seems that.
Well, let me.
And I'm not saying that you really have a choice here, but I just find it sort of odd that we can just find that amount of money, but.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
and perhaps I didn't do a good enough job explaining that. As we go through our financial statements each month, we have our school special programs fund. That is a fund that deals with certain activities that we provide that are self-supporting. So, for example, we rent facilities, we have costs associated with that, and it is self-supporting. Within that fund is an education tuition reimbursement account. And that is the account with which we bill other municipalities. For example, students who might come in through the Open Choice program, we actually bill Hartford for services that we provide. Typically, that is a one-to-one offset. However, over the years, we have accumulated funds that can only be used for that purpose. And so when we look at the financial statements, you'll see that each month we disclose how much is in that reserve and basically its purpose by nature of the description of that program. And so that's the reserve that I am tapping into. I'm not comfortable with that, but to that extent, But to be honest, that is what it's there for, and it's incumbent upon us to balance by the end of the year. We cannot go over budget, and so that's the solution that I've had to come up with. So that's 500 of it. The other is, as I said, the timing of a McKinney-Vento transportation grant was fortuitous in that it enabled us to realize $100,000 in savings. And then, we're putting off some of our hiring. We have 3 vacant maintenance positions right now. We're putting those off and we're not hiring them to the new year. We're looking at other vacancies and just not filling them in order to meet this obligation. But with that type of financial news so late in the year, it required a more aggressive approach than we would typically do.
And that becomes the longer term when we think about the budget. And I appreciate the point, and I would want to drive it home for folks in the audience and folks that are listening, because they've made their clear statement of point. But we're not able to continue to budget with a reliance on a reserve. We're not able to continue to budget with a freeze, whether it be that in hiring or even some spending. There are also, I know Liz mentioned it quickly earlier, but there are some spending freezes. There are things, annual subscriptions, online resources that start to add up to be a fair amount of money that contribute not to a portion of this that typically renew in the June, July timeframe. And some of those things with a freeze, it's not that we're going to go without those things. It's just meaning that we're going to push that renewal into the July timeframe under the new budget money, and so and then find ways to make certain that we have these efficiencies. So it's all of this shortfall from the state of Connecticut. It's cascading, and it is going to be potentially persistent until such time that the state is able to rectify the system that they have. So this is not an easy choice. This is not something that is necessarily even pitting one service above another. It's a genuine financial constraint that we've been faced with, where that $67,000 really needs to be earmarked toward this fund, because anything different, we're just going to face a larger problem in the coming school year financially.
And sure. Ethan, yes.
So let me go back to what I was asking before. Yeah, I get how you're addressing fiscal year 23.
Mm-hmm.
The fiscal year 24 budget that was passed 2 weeks ago, or whenever, is that going to be, so you got additional 67,000, I assume you needed approximately $500,000 to 700,000.
Did that the opposite way, sorry. To be honest, I don't know right now exactly how much we need. The amount that we receive and the percent that we receive is dependent upon costs incurred throughout the state, and then our portion of that we receive. I'm also hopeful that perhaps through legislative change that they will increase funding for our excess cost grant for the new fiscal year. So I really can't quantify that amount. However, it certainly seems likely that they will not fund us at the full 85%. And since the funds that I have available to us right now from the council are $67,000, that's all that I can put to it. But it seems likely that we'll still need to address
The
this.
67,000 didn't come from the school system? It came
No, that came from what
the town?
the town authorized.
Okay, so there's probably a greater need than the 67,000.
That would be my guess right now, but I can't say definitively without the relevant data.
Okay, so that's, you got money for the town budget that's going to address a large need, but only part of the need.
Correct.
Okay.
And if I may, with the segueing with that, I do want to formally acknowledge and thank the town council for receiving the budget that we proposed and receiving our concerns as well and being responsive to them. Again, as we know, unbeknownst to all of us, 2 weeks ago, we were not anticipating being in this predicament of having $700,000 less than what was needed. And we appreciate that our town council responded accordingly to this need. So certainly want to formally acknowledge that piece. Any other comments or questions? Again, we had the motion on the floor is with respect to increasing out-of-district tuition appropriation in the amount of $66,441. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Gail.
I just have a question on point of order. So are we just voting on the increase of 66,000, or are we re-voting on the entire budget?
It is voting on adding the 66,000 to the budget and for it to go to this specific line item.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments regarding the motion on the floor? Okay, we will now seek a motion. I'll ask for a roll call, please, Charlotte, if you may.
Dr. Chang?
Yes.
Mr. Goldman?
Yes.
Dr. Harris?
Yes.
Dr. Kamoff?
Yes.
Ms. Nazarella?
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Yes, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving now to staff communications and reports. We now will receive our superintendent's report.
Could I
Oh,
make it?
Please, yes. Before we go to staff communications reports, yes, Ethan.
Okay, I wanted to make a proposal. One of the critical tasks that we have as members of the West Hartford Board of Education is to approve the annual budget. And as I look back at the process for the fiscal '24 budget, next year's budget, and look forward at future budgets, I think it's important we review our processes and find ways to improve them. Future years will only become more difficult, as we saw tonight, but as the ESSER funds go away, we're losing $2 million in the upcoming fiscal year '24 budget, another $4 million in the fiscal year '25 budget, and we just had the state of Connecticut throw us a curveball. As I've said at previous meetings, I think Liz and the finance department of the school system have done an excellent job in recommending various saving opportunities, but I feel that we as board members need to be more involved in the process and work with the school system to identify cost savings opportunities or understand the budget much better up front. My assumption is that any dollars we save will be used for other school system needs, so as much as I'd like to cut costs, I just see it's just going to be a matter of shifting, but hopefully better utilization of the dollars if we can get ahead of it. Therefore, I'd like to propose that we create a task force to work with the administration for ways to improve our processes, to look for areas of the school system where we can be more cost efficient. Keeping the budget affordable for town residents is only going to become more difficult in future years, and I think we need to be more active in the process and set up a review process that will hopefully enable that, and we should be part of the solution. And so that was my proposal, is to set up a task force to find ways that we can improve the process.
Thank you. I just want to make sure to capture your motion accurately, so thank you for the in-depth explanation. If you could just state once again what the motion is.
Set up a task force. Set up a task force of board members with the school administration and see if there's ways we can work sooner in the process and find new ways to look at things.
Okay, with the stated motion, I will try to capture what you said. Your motion is to set up a task force, inclusive of Board of Education members and school administration, to see if there are ways to work sooner, with reviewing the budget process. Is there a motion?
That was
So that's your motion. Pardon me. Is there a second? Pardon me. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
I'll offer some discussion if I may. I'm hearing two things, Ethan, from you in terms of utilization of the funds, essentially the operationalizing the budget. When I hear utilization of the funds, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, how are the funds expended? What are the purchases? What are the things within the past budget? For example, and this was a perfect example of identification of a particular shortfall and needing to find the way. What is it that, how will we make up this $700,000 shortfall for the existing budget so that we come in, as is our responsibility, to the penny on the current year's budget. That is a responsibility, essentially that you've hired me, that I employ Liz and an entire team of individuals around, making decisions about. I think that we can forego filling that particular maintenance position, but we cannot forego filling this particular custodial position. This one's necessary in the school. This one over here, it will delay these particular projects, but I can assume that risk, potentially saying, okay, I'm not going to get this resource that was put in for the given year in order, because I think we can go one more year without it, and I need to be able to forecast for a potential shortfall for the state in a given year. So that's all sort of the operationalizing of the budget. My assumption is that's a responsibility that you've charged me with, and it's not that I want to hold all those marbles necessarily close to my chest. It's that it would be very difficult to be able to run a school district, any school district of any size, let alone this school district, on a day-to-day basis when those decisions need to be made through committee or through task force. That said, when I hear the other part of what I think you're saying, creating, I heard sooner in the review process, I heard you say review process, or it got repeated a couple of times, the opportunity for you as a board to be able to absorb what's being presented as a proposed budget, to be able to make decisions in and around the recommendations that are coming forward and how the money is being expended, the degree to which you agree with a particular avenue of approach that I might be using, given, hey, I'll use my math coaches as a great example. This was something that was put in front of the board a couple of years ago, and we give reports to say the degree to which that impact is there. This is something that I want to continue in the budget, or I don't want to continue in the budget. And during that budget process, you have the ability to say, yes to that, no to that. And if I'm hearing you, perhaps there's not enough time in that. So I'm more than open to saying how can the board be more effective in hearing more discussion around what ideas you might like from me to create in a longer period of time, or a greater level of detail, or even throughout the year, the way that the process is intended to work. And one of the things I think I've talked to all of you about in the interview process for this position is being able to give some real degree of transparency on the return of investment, so that you can know are the things that we're budgeting for, the programs, the people, the positions, the resources, et cetera, are they providing the return on investment that you would expect? And if not, what's the feedback to that? So my intention is to be able to provide that reporting to you as an ongoing basis. We have a structure for that, but perhaps we can make that even more transparent to all of you, and we can engage in greater conversations, so that we're essentially trying to meet some of that need, so that when it does come time for your responsibility as a board to hear the budget proposal, that you feel fully, fully educated, fully involved on the what and the why, and if more time in that process is something, I'm sure we can make recommendations around that.
Yes, and then there are other questions or comments in response to your motion. Yes.
So you there were two parts, but what I'd say is it's not a reflection of what's been there, because I think you guys have done, whether you or Andy or Liz, done a phenomenal job of bringing, here's cost savings opportunities. I just feel we're more in the stands reviewing, and I feel like we should be adding more to the conversation, certainly sooner, because it's a very condensed time period, and as much as, there's enough meetings, I'd rather be part of the process, and I just feel like I feel guilty, speaking for myself, that we're not doing more to contribute. and that was what drove it. So it's not a reflection of what's come. Well, I think what's come is great. I just think it's going to get worse. And I think just because of the funding being withdrawn, because COVID is fortunately over, so how can we help the process? And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm open to different ways to do it. I just feel that as a board, when again, I'm not, well, at least my intent is not to be in the day-to-day stuff, because it's more the overview and trying to be a contributor as opposed to a observer.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you. Jason?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the raising the motion, Ethan, because I think, and also Paul, thanks for the explanation, because I think, well, what your sort of preamble made me think of is, I guess, what is the role of the financial examiner? And I would just love to hear your reflections on your experience of being on the financial examiners in that role, and maybe also ask Claire to reflect to your experience on that, because that role does seem to be in the mode of reflecting on those decisions in the aggregate on a regular basis, to think of, in review of decisions that you've made over the course of, of the 2 weeks, and those reports tend to, in my mind, the way that I receive it as a kind of executive summary of budget choices that have happened over that period. So if you could kind of reflect on your experience of the financial examiner role, because I think that, to me, fulfills some, what you're saying about being involved in the budget process earlier, and having those kinds of conversations about efficiencies, about allocations, and how they're meeting the needs of the school district most effectively.
So the financial examiner is, we go through the information that we get from Liz, and I think she does a phenomenal job. I don't know if she's still here or not, but I think she does a phenomenal job. But we're very dependent upon it, and like what I'm used to is, from a financial review perspective, is on a monthly basis, you look and see how you're doing versus month, how you're doing year to date. That we don't budget. The school system doesn't budget by month, it budgets the full year, is my understanding. So it's based a lot on instinct, it's based a lot on inside knowledge. When I was looking at the budget and asked various questions, there were times where, I'm used to, you could take a certain percentage and figure it out from there. But Liz knew who the people were, whether there was a new person replacing an old person. We'll hire a paid employee. So, it would be a lot of work to add monthly budgets, and I'm not asking for that, although in a perfect world I'd say let's do that, because that's how you do it. So I find it interesting, but I feel we're more, again, observers, and it's not like we go in and say, well, can you move this or move that, because we don't have that knowledge or the time. I'd rather be up front, and maybe if we just did a longer period and got more involved in the process without, again, my objective is not to become a deterrent, it's not to get in the way, it's not to cause extra work for people or confusion, which I realize we can do, but it's how can we add more value to the system, which I think is what we're supposed to be doing. Did that answer the question? Okay, thank you.
Other questions or Claire?
So I've been a financial examiner since Step Poland stepped down, and I find the process very transparent about what is proposed, what has shifted, what unforeseen things have come up, and how they've had to reallocate. I take offense by budgeting by instinct, because I know we have amazing people and principals and directors and plant services and all that, and they're budgeting from experience in education. It's a process business, it's not a product business. You've got great background in product business. It's a very different thing when you're dealing with children, people, when 80% of our budget is all based on people, you don't have the big sales event. You don't get to finish. Every year when the year's over, there's still so much more you can teach. And so I find that the financial examiner's role gives me the opportunity to say, we approved this budget, you presented it. You did the hard work by going to all your principals and directors and saying, how can we cut? Is there anything we're not getting a bang for our buck for? Is there any place that we're not getting the return that we hope for? And everybody, I'm assuming, puts forward possibilities of how they could cut, and the superintendent has the tough job of looking at it all. Everybody comes together, they create that massive binder. We have 4 meetings in March that we go over it. If you feel that February you want a peak before the March time, I can understand that. Maybe that's something that would help. But their job is to do what they know how to do and budget what they know how to do from the years of experience that they've been doing it, the people they work with, the educational background, the study. I can have opinions about special ed because of my daughter. People can have opinions about other things. We all come to the board with our wheelhouse of experience. But we're not here to change their budget. We're here to look at what they propose, make the hard decisions of the cuts. And we have to learn how to make those hard decisions because next year there are going to be very hard, painful cuts. You think the people in town who didn't want cuts this year, next year it's going to be tough. But us being involved in the process, that's their job. And their job is to present to us what they think we can still be a great district by making these cuts. I've always gotten every single reply of any email I send. I've been given meetings when I ask for them. The meetings from the examiner's report, I feel every question I ask is answered. And this is my second budget process. And this has been the tougher one because last year there weren't the cuts. But cuts are difficult. And I trust the people that we hired, and I trust Paul to pull together a budget next year that, as painful as it will be, that's the work they do. If they had to make meetings with parents and teachers and board members throughout the year to make these decisions, I don't know what kind of process that would be. I've not heard of that being done in other districts.
Other questions or comments? Did someone? Gail, yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I just want to make a comment on this. I am not a financial person, and when I get this budget and it's 4 weeks before we need to vote on it, I find it exceedingly difficult to get my head around a $190 million budget. I don't really see it as, I don't trust the people who are writing the budget. I know everybody here is, sort of working on the same team. But I feel uncomfortable voting on a $190 million budget that I don't really have a good understanding of. And that's not a criticism of anybody, it's just simply the way it is. It's $190 million, and being that most of us here are not financial people, I would say, and I'm not making an assumption for other people, but I would assume that there are people here just like me who are like, sort of struggling with this. So I see this as one of the, main things that the board is actually supposed to take care of. This and hiring a superintendent and maybe setting policy. I mean, those are kind of our directives. So when we get a budget that, we've got 4 weeks to look at, and I always appreciate, I'm asking people questions all the time, and people are answering me at like 2 in the morning, and I totally appreciate that. But I think that some kind of a longer process, be it a task force that's not necessarily trying to, dictate anything, but just for the understanding of the whole process would be, helpful. I just think that, I was hoping that actually Claire and Ethan, because they already are meeting once a month, that they could essentially be the task force that, could, whatever that task force is supposed to do, they're already meeting anyways, so maybe they get, another directive, so they're doing something beyond what they're currently doing. But I do feel uncomfortable with it, and I wish that we were doing it in a different way so that we're not, just kind of crunching it at the last 4 weeks and still sort of feeling like not really sure what, what's exactly going on with it. That's just my.
Yes, Paul.
I want to give you guys as much time to talk because board conversation more than anything, but I want to be able to respond to things that I can, and I want to take definitely want to take what you're saying as very genuine in terms of the intent. It's a big number, it's a big budget, it's a lot of pages, it's a lot of paper, it's a lot of stuff. So if, and Gail, maybe I'm hearing you say something slightly different from Ethan in terms of a comfort level and ability to really digest, understand, have confidence in the decisions that you need to make. That's, thoroughly understand that. Ethan, I heard you say, it's not a question of trust or anything else, and I take you at your word on that. That's not a question for me. I guess what I want to suggest is I'd like to look at the processes that we have and the time that we have, because when I hear task force, what I think of, and I heard, community members and bringing more people on it, to me that's like bringing a whole lot of other folks with less connection and less context than all of you have, just based on the frequency, based on your roles, the frequency of our communication and all the rest. I think there is a much simpler means by which to provide, and your suggestion's an easy one. Hey, if there's some venue by which we're providing you as, and I also look at the tenure of different people on the board and the varying degrees of comfort based on how many times folks have done this. But as you have the opportunity to pass more than one budget or get involved and get multiple years, you'll also gain the experience and the confidence. But it would be it would not be a big challenge to take opportunity to provide you with more background, more information, essentially more time, even if that became one-on-one time. I know that we're constrained in terms of how we're able to meet simply based on what constitutes a board meeting versus what constitutes just a one-on-one conversation, or perhaps a board workshop, or perhaps the opportunities to, you also have a professional organization with CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, where we can invest in you so that we can provide you greater depth of understanding. And Ethan, I still sort of hear you saying more time. Relative to any guilt you might feel, I would tell you to let it go. That's just one person.
Just if I could just be clear, I think you guys do a great job. I just feel like I should be helping more, or I should be adding some value. We're trying to, as opposed to getting in the way.
All right.
So I just want, before we would vote on this, is just some clarification as to what the motion is. I think, there's a difference between having more time to process and feel informed and understand the budget, because I hear you, Gail, like it's a huge responsibility, and we should all have a level of comfort when we're approving that budget, that we understand the budget and we understand what we're voting on and what the impact will be across town. I support that idea if people would like more time. But that's, in my opinion, that's different than what Ethan is proposing. Ethan is proposing that we become actively involved and an active part of the budget process. And I don't agree with that. I think it speaks to a lot of things. I mean, as a board member, I've been told that my responsibility is to hire a superintendent, which we did this year. Would have preferred to not have to ever do that during my term. That we govern through policy and coming up with policy, reviewing policy, and we approve the budget. That was always my understanding. We review and approve. I feel that as a board member, and I said the last time, I think there are things that we do as a board that requires us to stay in our lane. And me jumping into a meeting with Liz and Paul and whoever else is involved to give my input into their budget feels like it's veering way out of my lane. So I just feel like if we can clarify what we're looking at in terms of, I agree. When I hear the word task force, I feel like this active engagement, like we're coming in and we're going to tell you how to run your budget and what line items, and I don't think that that's our role as a board member. And I think we have to be respectful and again, trust the process as it's been done, and trust the people that are currently, running our district. I mean, that's part of the reason I wanted to be on the Board of Ed, because I value them and I respect them as individuals as well as what they do for our district. And I feel like saying, I'd like to sit in on a budget meeting and tell you how to rework your budget is really, at some level, disrespectful. And it's mistrustful. And I would not feel comfortable with anything along those lines.
Other comments? Again, we're in the discussion with the proposed motion on the floor. Gail.
So thank you, Ari. I just want to mention that I see the process as more collaborative, that we are working together. I don't really see it as we go into a meeting with Paul and his team and then sort of say, oh, we don't like this, we don't like that. But I do think that what Ethan might be proposing would give a level of understanding that I don't really think, again, I'm speaking for myself, I certainly don't have it, and I would venture to guess that a lot of people sitting up here don't have it. So, I ran up my practice for many years, and I was obviously doing the finances, and I wanted to, before I would agree to things financially, I wanted to understand them. I wasn't just sort of signing off on what everybody else was doing, and it's not a level of trust. I trust everybody here. I know that we're all, again, working on the same team, but to be asked to vote on a $190 million budget without really understanding most of it, I don't think is really what we should be doing. It's not about telling Paul and his team what to do. It's about gaining a level of understanding, which I think if the process was longer and went, throughout the year, would be certainly I would feel a lot more comfortable. So that's, I see us as working collaboratively, not really in tandem.
If that's what we're voting on, I'm in 100%. I am in 100% support of us, because I think it's important for every person on this board to have a good understanding of the budget. But that's different than creating a task force. I think similar to what Claire had said, we all come to this board table with different areas of expertise, training, work experience, and like if I were to kind of, and maybe this is a good way to kind of tease this out, like I think about kind of Ethan, with your business background, coming in and proposing this. In my mind, it would be something very similar to either, for example, Claire coming in and saying, I'd like to create a special ed task force where I have monthly meetings with Melissa, and I get to review kind of what the special ed curriculum is, and I want to get a better understanding of what special ed looks like in our district, but I want to be actively involved. It would be like me saying, given my history and my my training and experience in behavioral health, I think that it's really important that we create a mental health task force to be part of those decisions that are being made for school counseling, for IEPs, whereas it would never even occur to me to come up with something like that. I think what we come to the board table with helps us and provides us different perspectives and opinions about things, but I don't necessarily think that we are here to take our expertise and impose it upon whatever area of interest is happening in the district that we feel, we have some level of expertise over.
I want to add to what Ari said and try to respond to the questions that I'm hearing, if I'm understanding them, because when I hear create task force, Ethan, I'm hearing understood, but the creation of, it sounds like we're trying to create something different, and it sounded like, and so I'd like to have clarity on the intent. A task force being creating or inviting audience broader than what currently exists. It's my responsibility as your superintendent to be able to communicate to you the needs of the school, to be able to propose the budget, and I have a responsibility to make sure that you all are versed enough and I'm responsive to your questions so that you can make those decisions appropriately. It's not, we hear public input. Obviously, it's your responsibility, mine by extension, I listen to the public as well, to be responsive to their needs, but it's not placing them into the decision-making process. That's obviously, that rests solely with the board. All that said, we have structures. So I'm not yet understanding nor envisioning what you might be intending to a new structure you want to create or an existing structure you want to change. However, what I'm suggesting is what I want to be responsive to. I want to be responsive to if and I'm already prepared tonight with a first taste of that in the communication structures that we have, the presentations I give to you here at this board table as part of my update, and in communications that we have in between the meetings, and in the structure that we have for the presentation of the budget itself. To me, that's a structure that I know, that I've lived with here in the district for 30 years, and I think that I can be responsive to the need just by leveraging that, just by hearing you say, I need more information, I need a greater depth of understanding, I need to know what you're thinking, and be able to provide that as ongoing updates. To me, I can do that tonight and continuously throughout the year. When I'm hearing about, I want to create something new or I want to bring additional people to the table, to me that's just undefined. And if I'm being honest, I'm very uncomfortable with it because it's undefined. I'm not uncomfortable with what you're asking me, and I think I can be responsive to that.
So it just occurred to me, if we were board members of a hospital, there would be a budget presented to us that we would approve or make adjustments to. What all those departments within the hospital did, how they spent, what equipment they wanted to buy, how the housekeeping staff was done, all those things would be things that I wouldn't know about. I have a higher comfort level because I've been in education for 24 years. I know what plant services does. I know about cafeteria upgrades because I've been in those cafeterias. So I have a higher comfort level just because I've lived in that field, where you on a hospital board, Gail, would understand more about what you were approving. And so I feel that with the financial examiner's report every month, I get to see whether the proposed things are what are happening and where there's adjustments. I do trust Paul that if we want more financial information throughout his superintendent's report, that could be there. But as far as me, if I were on a hospital board, trying to understand all the different departments and how they were spending, you would have to have faith and trust in what is being presented to you by the chief person in the hospital that presents the board with the budget, and then the amount of time. So if it's more time, if it's more in-depth financial examiners reports, if it's Paul giving more detail throughout the year. I know also that at any time we make an appointment, we're allowed to come in and get clarification. So I don't see what else we would need.
So with, Jason.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Oh, God. Okay. So I just wanted to respond to a point, Paul, that you had made earlier about CABE as a resource. I've done one of the webinars with CABE on public communications and found it extremely educational. And I know they do have trainings for budget, and they do have other kinds of ways to build familiarity, build confidence, and they are a resource. I think, if this continues to be a challenge, in addition to, I think, Paul, what you're saying about, it's about being responsive to the questions. Those are definitely spaces that are designed for board members to build on.
Okay. So I think a couple things. I think there is something to the timing, because I think the 4 weeks, while it works well for blocking off the month of March, it is condensed, and particularly if you're doing other things. I guess the big difference is, where I come at it is, my experience is usually the more communication you have, and again, not to question, but the more communication you have, is the better the ideas flow, and that more people than, if it's just me coming up with ideas, it's limited. If it's multiple people having discussions, it creates a new process of flow. So I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. All I'm looking to say is, can there be more, find a way to have more communication? And again, I feel I'm not carrying my weight of just speaking for myself. And there should be more that I can do to at least ask questions, do the process. This was my idea. I mean, everybody, task force, I was trying to keep as a generalized term, because I'm willing to make adjustments to get something done. I don't have, well, this is it and this is going to dictate, because for me to come in and dictate what should be there would be stupid, because I don't claim to know, but there is something to having various people ask, and I just feel the more conversations you have, without it becoming consuming and all timely, but there should be a way that we can communicate more and get more thoughts and ideas on the table than just, limited conversation and just coming in at the end and saying yay or nay. So, I don't know, for whatever that's worth.
Well, it's worth a lot, and with that, I'm going to, before I call for the vote, I want to say that I really appreciate the discussion that has been had here, robust discussion. I appreciate the motion that has been made. It definitely shows where you are impassioned, and it makes sense with your financial background. And with you saying you feel guilty, it's like, oh boy, please don't feel guilty. But again, that just highlights how impassioned you are. I think what's important for us to remember, and that has been reflected by comments collectively made by all in terms of our role as board members. We have the honor of appointing the superintendent, we have the honor of establishing policy, and of issuing budget. And it's important to know that when it comes to the budget is a reflection of the values and the principles that we support as a district. And adhering to and following those values, principles that we support as a district, that is reflected in the policies that we institute. So we are a lot more involved in the process than what may be seen. I appreciate hearing everyone saying, wanting to learn more, wanting to know more, wanting to have more conversation. That's good. That's good to know that we want to have those lines of communication open. That's a good thing. And I think from what I'm hearing, that there is a collective sense of wanting to maybe extend the off-ramp of when the budget is shared with us. And thank you so much, Paul, for being willing to offer and share things with us prior to it. And from what I gather, with the board budget. As we know, it's something that does not begin just in January of the year that we vote. It's something that has already begun. So the budget for next year has already begun. And we know that with every 2 weeks is having a financial report update that's given to us, that is part of the conversation. We know that when we receive updates in regards to programs and curriculums and the students, how they're performing, that is a manifestation of the budget that's put into those programs. So there are many ways that we are a part of the decision-making when it comes to the budget. However, I certainly do hear what you're saying of wanting to have more of that. I must say, though, with respect to the budget, the motion, as it reads on the floor, with the motion specifically stating task force, that is what we have to vote on. And so with the motion as it has been read and passed and seconded, that is, asking for those that are in favor of the motion as it has been stated.
Can I ask a quick question?
We're in discussion, yes.
Is there a better word than task force? Because the wording to me isn't important. It was more the concept of assistance, committee. I don't know what to call it.
No, I appreciate that.
And I guess I'm not the wordsmith here.
Well, that's all right. I appreciate that. And I think what I am going to encourage for us to continue to discuss how we can collectively, collaboratively enhance all of our collective awareness of the process. And so thankful again for our superintendent's support of that. However, we must remember when it comes to our role as Board of Education members, it is to govern. And there is a difference between governing and managing. The management day-to-day details, that is something we've entrusted our superintendent, the executive team, the principals, the teachers, all of those persons to do the day-to-day management aspect. Our role is to govern what is being managed. So again, with respect to the motion on the floor, with respect to task force, and also in the essence of time, and we have other agenda items to get to, yes, Gail.
Could you read the motion back before we vote?
I will, yes. The motion is to set up a task force of Board of Education members and school administration to see ways to work sooner to review the budget process. All of those in favor, say aye.
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 Those that oppose, nay.
No.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, the motion does not pass. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We will continue on with the agenda. And we now will receive staff communications and reports. Now we'll have the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And on the topic of budget, at the risk of talking more, I did also want to extend my gratitude to our West Hartford Mayor, Sherry Cantor, our Town Manager, Rick Ledwith, and the entirety of the Town Council for passing the Board of Education's budget, and again providing us that additional funding that you appropriated. I did want to share with you what is underway. As Lorna just mentioned, the 2024-2025 budget process is already underway, and I have a couple of highlights to share with you. Things that the team is working on to try to have a good understanding of where costs are going to be and to be able to rein in costs and find efficiencies wherever it is possible. So first credit goes to Dr. Morrow, his work with our transportation office. He's been doing an analysis of all of our bus routes. He's collaborated with the transportation office to have head counts conducted over a 2-week period in order to gauge accurate figures and true ridership. And based on that, there's a plan to consolidate 2 bus routes moving forward, which will provide us with some savings. Melissa Caballero in Pupil Services has been working with the entirety of her team to conduct analysis of 100% of the students who are currently outplaced and receiving their educational services outside of our buildings. Looking specifically at who is eligible for re-entry into our programming based on their advancement in those and their measure of needs, who may be aging out of the special education program, essentially graduating from services, who is due for reassessment in order to, at the end of the day, meet at least these 2 goals, ensuring that we are providing the appropriate supports that are due to our students and at the same time providing a least restrictive environment. As I said earlier, at no time do we make those decisions for student placement based on financial constraints. We base them entirely on what the needs of the students are, but it's important that we have a good analysis of that so that we are projecting costs appropriately, and at the same time perhaps identifying programming that we might be able to provide in district as the case may be. We're currently in the midst of our kindergarten registration across all of our elementary schools. We monitor the enrollment trends essentially from now right through to the opening of school to verify our staffing levels are appropriate. In addition, as we hire and throughout the remainder of this summer, we conduct an analysis of how closely the experience base of our teachers new into the district and those placements match the projections, because that establishes the baseline for the following year's budget in terms of essentially the workforce that we employ and how they will move up on step within our contracts. And then certainly moving forward into the summer as our national and state assessment results come in, we will conduct a return on investment analysis for our programming and all of our various supports, as well as any potential impact on resourcing to make sure that the programming that we're providing is yielding the results that we would hope anticipate as part of our educational mission and the vision for our schools. I want to give an update on staffing, and I do want to start with what I intended to start with was an announcement of our new assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. So it is with great pride and excitement that I announce the appointment of Ann McKernan as West Hartford Public Schools' next assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, effective May 1st of 2023. And if you'll indulge me, I want to put her on the spot a little bit. Ann is an inspiring and collaborative leader who has provided vision and direction to our secondary schools since 2016. Over the course of this past school year, as you well know, she has stepped forward in the role of interim assistant superintendent for administration. Her exceptional talent and her previous experience, both here in West Hartford, with the State Department of Education, with CREC, and with the Enfield Public Schools, have enabled her to achieve a seamless transition into executive leadership roles and provide outstanding, stable, and responsible stewardship of our school safety program and student relations. In this most recent role, she had championed the efforts to support continuous improvement in our school environments and mental health support through the school-based diversion initiative, coupled with our work here in the district on restorative practices. She has worked diligently to collaborate with members of the Board of Education to review and revise school board policy in support of our students and our community. And Ann is a well-known talent for creative problem solving, who brings energy, passion, and dedication, as well as her ability to collaborate and facilitate an active engagement among a broad range of stakeholders. It makes her a catalyst for continuous systemic improvement. She champions student growth and achievement and embodies the district mission to prepare and inspire all students. Her previous work on significant projects such as the Vision of the Graduate and the Mastery Experience Program represent groundbreaking and lasting contributions to the educational experience of students and the culture of our schools. Ann is a graduate of the University of Connecticut's Executive Leadership Program. She's earned her bachelor's degree in political science from Fordham University and a master's degree in public policy from Trinity College. In addition, she holds a 6th-year certificate in educational leadership from Southern Connecticut State University. She is an exceptional partner, and I am so glad to welcome her to this new role. I'd like to offer her one more round of applause. Continuing on the topic of staffing, I want to also throw congratulations out to Melissa Hickey, who's currently serving as an assistant principal at Hall High School. She's accepted a principalship at Tolland Middle School. And so she brings her amazing talent for instructional leadership to bear. And while it is outside West Hartford, I am very pleased to see her continued growth and lasting impact that she has made on our district. I'd like to offer congratulations to Teresa Giolito, who has formally announced her retirement from Smith STEM School. Teresa grew up here in the district, serving 10 years at Smith as both a Spanish teacher and a fourth grade classroom teacher. Previous to that, she was following that, she was a curriculum specialist at Duffy for 2 years before moving into administration in Farmington, where she worked for 4 years before returning home to West Hartford. So grateful for her service and so excited as she begins her next chapter. The formal process for the Smith principalship as well as the Brayburn principal positions are both underway. Brayburn is about a week or so sooner in the process. And in addition, we will be posting the Director of Equity Advancement opening, as well as with Ann's good news, we will be posting the Director of Secondary Education and begin those formal processes. I want to further recognize Mr. Ted Dillon, who is one of our outstanding and dedicated department supervisors within Pupil Services, on the announcement of his retirement at the end of this year, but he has promised to still be a face in our schools, whether it be on a part-time or short-term basis. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize Jane Roy in our business office on her retirement after 28 years of dedicated service. While she is small in stature, she has left dramatically big shoes to fill. I have some celebrations that I wanted to share. I want to compliment our PE department and our program schools who supported our unified sports program this past Saturday at Conard High School. This event is truly a celebration of the human spirit and the integration of our general and special education programming. In addition, our PE department has recently hosted the first annual Unified Spring Dance. This dance involved students from both Conard and Hall High School who are in our intensive academic program and any of their invited guests. We had a parent and local DJ who dedicated their time free of charge to support the event, as did our foods classes who prepared items for participants. I want to recognize Whiting Lane School and the Early Learning Center, who recently hosted a multicultural night highlighting over 30 countries and cultures through food, literature, presentations, readings, music, dance, and traditional dress. A huge thank you goes out to Ryan Cronin, Ty Paworski, and Amanda Geller for all of the efforts to coordinate a fantastic event. For the second year in a row, Hall High School claims state championship honors in the esports Super Smash Brother competition. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm told it's all the rage with the students. And our own Dr. Michelle Graveline, she will be upset with me later for this, was honored at the University of Connecticut Professional Recognition Awards ceremony as a Silver Jubilee recipient, celebrating 25 years of partnership as an early college experience educator. So kudos to all of those folks. Very briefly, upcoming this entire month, we are celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Our schools do an excellent job to curate resources, and our website reflects references that parents may wish to access to extend learning at home. As I believe Megan mentioned, this coming Saturday, May 6th, is our annual Open Choice Spring Family Festival. The event will be held at Bushnell Park from 1 to 3, and there is an email with registration information that's been sent out to all families. On May 8th, our Office of Equity Advancement and the West Hartford EDI will sponsor a community program related to mental health awareness. And finally, in response to a question that's come up at the table before, in early June, the district will be hosting an SEL literacy review. This is a follow-up from the Board of Education inquiries for more of an open process that engages the broader community in a review of our SEL curriculum with a specific emphasis on that identity strand, gender stereotypes, and gender identity. As you will recall, we hosted community learning walks about our SEL curriculum in each of our 11 elementary schools this year. I was fortunate to be able to attend more than half of those meetings, and I was genuinely impressed with the engagement of a diverse audience of community members. The meetings were very useful in terms of the feedback that we have received, and it has helped to inform a number of recommendations to refine and improve our SEL curriculum, particularly in the area of gender stereotypes and gender identity. All of those who participated in the community meetings at the schools, as well as the original group of community members who provided us with initial recommendations, will be invited to this meeting in early June, given their grounding in the work, and they will provide us feedback to recommended changes that we intend based on what we've learned from this varied group of stakeholders. So that is my report.
Right, thank you so much, Paul. Teammates, questions, comments regarding the superintendent's report? Gail?
Yeah, Paul, can you explain a little bit more about what the SEL literacy review is? Is that going to be like relooking at all the books, or is it something else?
No, it's related. I wouldn't say that it's inclusive. So the of all of the books, because the events that we held at the schools was the opportunity where we invited all families to have the opportunity to look at all of the books and to receive a sample lesson. From that, we have received feedback about a couple of the books that the question is, do they do the best possible job at addressing the three stated goals of that particular strand of the identity SEL curriculum? And I think I've been open at the table about we do feel that if we were able to find better texts for a couple of the texts, that would be something that we'd be very open to looking at. So we've curated all the feedback, identified those books that we got the most feedback on, pros and cons, and we have some recommendations. We want to engage those stakeholders who have been grounded in that work with looking at what we're recommending, hear their feedback on that. We've had some separate meetings with some individuals that have also suggested titles to us, so we plan to kind of share all of that with those folks and gain their feedback and let that help us to inform the decisions that we make relative to any changes.
Do you have the date of that or not yet?
It's in early June. We're looking at the first week. I want to nail that down, but as soon as it's nailed down, I've asked my curriculum office to be sending out those invitations to all who participated, and certainly I'll make certain that the board knows about it as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from our superintendent's update? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And congratulations for giving your first update. Now moving to staff reports and board discussions. We now will receive the profile and performance report, the state metrics. And we welcome to the table Ms. Ann McKernan and Ms. Melissa Caballero, who will report.
Excellent. So while they're getting situated and getting the projector on, I'll just intro this a little bit. The district performance and profile report, this is an annual report that's produced by the state of Connecticut for every school, for every public school in the district. It's available on EdSite, which is the state public, basically this state public reporting system for for the health of the education in Connecticut in general. And I dare say that if the budget is complex, the PPR is something even more dramatic. It goes through a significant number of indicators, not only of performance, but it goes through enrollment trends. It references expenditures. It looks at our diversity of our staff. And it's really one of the main guides by which we measure our achievement as a school district, and it informs ongoing priorities. Try pulling it out and putting it in again, yeah. Much of what's in the PPR is reported to you through very specific individual reports throughout the course of the year. such as our state assessment results and our AP results and things of this nature, which show up under different metrics that I'm sure Ann and Melissa will highlight. But with that, I'm going to allow them to filibuster as they figure out their technology issues.
Well, first of all, perhaps as we get our technology ready, I would like to thank Paul for that beautiful introduction and your support. And as I go into this new role, it's very kind of you to see all those smiling faces and to know we have all of you behind us. I really do appreciate that. I also appreciate Paul for giving me the most dense report as my first one to offer you, because just the paperwork here is the background if you have questions I will be looking at. It is a very dense report, and I'm sorry we're struggling to get this up here.
Do you have another
I'm sorry?
one?
Is it in the team drive?
No. But I can get it there. Sorry about this delay.
That's actually what I may propose, if there are any objections, team. We'll take a 5-minute pause, a bio break if need be, and that will allow time to work. Any objections with that? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute pause until we get things up and running. Thank you so much.
results. So because of this report is a comprehensive report that looks at many, many indicators, many of them you've seen during the year. This report is published by the State Department of Education for all school districts and schools, and it reports both metrics and descriptive factors about schools. It's kind of like your school's report card, your district's report card. So there's many, many metrics to report, and we will highlight tonight. I do believe you received a copy in your board packet, a copy of this year's report, so it looks like this document. Very dense, lots of good information that we use in many ways on student educator data, on our pupil services department, on how we're doing with college and career readiness, and our general performance and accountability. And we'll have time for discussion and questions either along the way or at the end, whatever's most comfortable for you. We use the report mostly to improve our educational practice based on these results. We also use the report to inform our stakeholders of what's happening in education in our town, and also to celebrate many successes, because there's lots of good news in these reports, and particularly in this time where we've had such interruption to education, to see where we've been and then to go through the pandemic and then to come back. That's very helpful to us to see where we were versus the past and how far we've come back to some of our goals. And so it's a widely used report, and it's just rich with information. There are categories, and you'll see them right here, but we get a glimpse of our students, we get a good glimpse of our teachers, our pupil services department. It's rich with information on that department and those children and teachers. And also in the performance and accountability section, these are the 12 indicators that the state has identified in their next generation accountability system, and we report on those. So we'd like to start off with our students and some of the highlights that we see. Are we seeing a small but continuous increase in student diversity over the last 5 years? I've tried to make most of our metrics over the last 5 years to be consistent. We've seen, this was a very strong highlight for us this year in a good category of seeing a lower amount of suspension and expulsion across our categories and in specific subgroups that we would really be interested in seeing how we're doing, including students with disabilities, students who qualify free and reduced price lunch or meals, our Hispanic and our Black subgroups. We've seen decreases there, in many cases hitting their all-time lows in suspension. And this data has been reported in this format since approximately 2014. So it's not a short amount of time we've seen this. Those were all very exciting to see. In educator diversity, we are seeing a slow but continued upward trend in educator diversity, which we talk about regularly. Julio is doing a great job at coming up with innovative ideas to address this challenge. He also continuously is looking for new programs. The TRP was a new program last year, which has yielded some educators for us, and we continue working with our young students who are interested in education, as well as attending all types of fairs and all kinds of outreach to people of color to come and join our team. So the good news is we're seeing some increases there, certainly not as fast as we'd like, but they are increases, which is good, and our student diversity does continue to increase, albeit not at a particularly fast rate. The largest group for increase in the last year was, in the last 5 years, well, in the last year I should say, is students who identify as 2 or more races was our largest increase. One category that was not good, and we're seeing this around the state as well, is chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is hitting a higher rate than we've seen certainly ever in West Hartford, but ever within the state. Over the last 5 years, the state's percentage of students who are chronically absent is up approximately 13%, and it's similar in West Hartford. So we're mirroring that trend. We're still below the state average in chronic absenteeism, but we caught this trend early in the year and have been discussing it throughout. What are the factors? Which groups of students are tending to be absent more frequently? One of the things I think that may have been tricky is during COVID, we were not telling parents, you've got to come to school, you've got to come to school, you've got to come to school because of the pandemic. In fact, we were saying, if you're not feeling well, please stay home. I don't know if that's a factor or not, but certainly all of this has been in response to COVID. So it's not that it was gradually ticking up for a few years, then COVID hit and these massive jumps in chronic absenteeism. So we are addressing that in many ways, talk to different people to look at which grades are the most absent, and we are finding very young children are interestingly, some of our youngest children have some of the higher absentee rates. We're also looking at some of our communication systems, because the communication changed so dramatically during COVID that it would be wise to look back at our systems and say, how are we communicating back? Because there was a period of time where people said, are we still telling parents, you have a high absentee rate, or should we, there was a delay perhaps in when that switch was made. So it is a trend that we're seeing. It's mirroring through the state, and I think we're prepared to take that on.
Just whether or not the state or West Hartford is tracking because of like the quarantine and COVID. I mean, if a kid is out 10 days for COVID. Oh, sorry. If they're out for 10 days for COVID, 18 days is chronically absent for the year. So is that being taken into consideration? Are we looking at, is this due to illness, or is this due to?
Yeah, so during COVID, they suspended that chronic absenteeism rule. However, since we've now returned, the state has gone back to, so if you're out and it happens to be for COVID or for something else, it does count. It's not a question of excused or unexcused, as you said. It's just crossing that 10% threshold. So 18 days is just deemed as chronically absent. And again, it's a red flag, because the state recognizes there's a high correlation. If you're not present at school for any reason, you're just not able to access the programming, and it can lead to other concerns.
Out of fairness, a question is for Ethan and then Claire.
So I was just looking for translation. Lowest ever SWD, FRL. I wasn't
So
sure.
the students with disabilities.
Yep.
So that we have a lower suspension expulsion rate across the board, and the lowest ever amount or percentage for students with disabilities, for students who qualify for free or reduced price meals.
Okay.
FRL, Hispanic, students who fall in the subcategory of Hispanic, identify as Hispanic, and students who are Black.
So is that a negative point or a drop in the
It's a
point?
drop. It's a drop.
So what
So
would the
that's a good
percent
thing.
be before what was the outcome?
That our suspension rate last year overall was, that's why I have all the backup
That's fine.
for you.
Okay.
I believe we were at 3.7% of the students who
Okay.
had an expulsion.
Thank you.
And that's a drop, but that's good news, because that's something we work on a lot in our equity work, in all of our work, our classroom environment work. So,
Pardon, sorry, Claire had a quick question.
oh, I'm
Pardon.
sorry, Claire.
So the state, the mental health days given to all kids, was that instituted
Yes,
that
sir.
year or the next year?
I
Or this
believe-
year?
I know it's instituted this year. I'd have to check if we had it last year, but
My
it would still
recollection
be-
is it's 2 years old, but
Yeah.
any absence,
It
even a
doesn't-
mental health
regardless.
day, a suspension or expulsion, those are all,
They're counted.
they're all counted. Any day of absence, any excused day, any unexcused day.
I'm just wondering, to tell kids you can have 2 days for any reason or for mental health, would that also increase the numbers?
Yes, it would. And just to be clear, it is, we say 18, I say 18 all the time, but that's only if you're in school for the whole year. If you come in, let's say, like if you transferred in, it's really 10% of your days in attendance. And every time I say that, the IT department corrects me. So I want to be clear, it's not 18 days if you started halfway through the year. It's only if you're there for the full. So moving forward, students with disabilities, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Melissa.
Yep. So I've sat before the board quite a bit and talked about the trends that we're seeing with our students with disabilities. So I'm sure this information won't be very surprising to you that we're seeing a continued increase in our rates of students with disabilities. It's up 16% over the last 5 years.
No,
Is
3.8.
3.8% to 16%.
16% of students with disabilities in our district. The state average right now is 16.3, so we're still below the state average, but comparably, 5 years ago, we were at 12.4%. And so that equates to a student count in the 17-18 school year of 1,246 students with disabilities. And currently, last year, we use October 1 count, so that doesn't account for students that moved in across the school year, of 1,461. And we already know that this year we're around 1,600. So those numbers are greatly climbing. I heard Claire mention kind of the trend of students moving into the district. We do see that trend happening. And what we see within our IDA disability category, so you'll see on your performance report only a few of the disability categories. The way the state reports that is there's 13 in total, and they lump a number of them under other disabilities because there's a smaller prevalence rate like blind deafness, deaf and hard of hearing, and you'll see that number's a little higher in West Hartford than it is in other towns because of our deaf and hard of hearing population, and we do have students who do fall into those categories that are maybe a little less common in some other districts. But what we see when we really analyze the trends over 5 years is that our numbers in most of our disability categories are relatively stable. So our percentage of students with autism, while we view that as a growing population, that the percentage is actually stable across the 5 years. So we're maintaining at about the same percentage rate. Where we're seeing our largest growth is actually in the area of learning disabilities. And we attribute that to two different factors. We suspect that there might be some impact from the COVID pandemic and lost instruction. And so we're monitoring that very closely to see if that is the case. But also we had that key legislation change in 2015 under specific learning disabilities is the category of dyslexia. It's not something that's recognized across all 50 states. We are one of the few states that recognizes dyslexia, and I think our district has done a really good job of putting together a steering committee and a work group when the legislation changed and being at the forefront of being able to accurately identify and remediate students with dyslexia and having that profile and acquiring curriculum and the resources and materials, training staff. But because that falls under learning disability, it's as if there was another category developed. So we did see a pretty sharp increase in that disability category, a total count increase across 5 years from 324 to 488. And so I anticipate that number will continue to grow. And then while might be surprising to hear that speech and language numbers have increased when you put it in the context of a pandemic where we were wearing masks and we had less social opportunities, what we're really seeing is a trend at the very young ages of increased speech articulation needs that we attribute to more isolation, lack of peer models, and then masking, which made it harder for kids to hear sounds accurately and then produce sounds accurately. And we've seen that in our trends for referrals to our early learning center, our students exiting birth to 3 or accessing birth to 3 services for those speech services. So coming into us just with a higher prevalence rate. I do want to note that if you look on your PPR report on page 3, you will see our out-of-district numbers. I just want to flag that those numbers might be a little bit confusing in the way that they report the numbers. So I've shared with the board before that we have a number of students who we support fiscally with our IDEA funding that are not just our ABSEP or approved special education out-of-district students who are special ed. We also fund any students that attend a CREC magnet school who have an IEP. That's a parent choice to elect to be part of a CREC magnet school. While the magnet school might have staff in-house, such as a special ed teacher, a speech and language pathologist, a clinician, they actually bill the district for those services. So West Hartford is still funding their special education services. CREC or interstate magnets actually don't absorb that cost under IDEA. So that's just good for you to know that in these numbers include our inter-district magnet students. And additionally, we are the 3rd in the state for the number of private schools in a town. And so the way that the IDEA law functions for funding for parentally placed private school students who are placed by choice. You might be a Cheshire non-resident living in Cheshire, but your child attends a private school that's physically located in the town of West Hartford. West Hartford becomes responsible for compliance with IDA laws, regulations, and also funding. So that is just unique to that. So when you see the number of 162, I just want you to know that that is not an accurate number of students who are placed out of district for special education needs. The correct number is 102 students that are placed out of district on October 1 of last year. So I just wanted to clarify that that number looks a little higher than the actual number is. When you hear out of district, you interpret it as a special education out of district school. But for the purposes of state reporting, they kind of lump all of those things in together because the funds are technically used for all of those purposes. So I just, for the board's purposes, wanted to clarify that. And Paul did a great job really explaining earlier how when we look at and analyze who's going out, really our students are falling into three main categories. It's our significantly disabled students who have significant cognitive deficits, multiply disabled, high-level autism needs. That's kind of one category. The second category is our students who have emotional disabilities that might manifest in a behavioral or psychiatric manner and require that very specialized programming. And then the third is our trauma-informed, clinically significant students who require a therapeutic setting. And so we really see those trends manifesting. We do meet regularly to talk about who's out, what our student needs are, and who can we bring back. And I've shared that we do this regularly. My department supervisor, who I can't say enough nice things about, Dr. Marie Davis, works so closely with our in-school teams. And while it's always our interest to bring students back to district, it's really important to stress the partnership that happens between those out-of-district partners and our school teams who have to work really closely together to create a seamless transition plan. And to date, we've had 100% success with every student we brought back to district, that they've come back to district and been successful, which is a great story to kind of highlight some of the work that our school teams do, because it's really happening at the ground level and building those relationships with families again and reintegrating our students. Right now we have 23 students that we anticipate will either age out, graduate, or be returning back to school, our school district next school year. And we currently have some students that we've developed really unique plans for that are already doing like a hybrid program where they're attending a high school maybe for part of the day, a couple of periods a day. So we're really motivated to bring our students back, but as Paul said earlier, we're also very dedicated to our students to ensure that we're exploring the continuum of services and programming and meeting their needs legally.
So with this 162, it's 102 that are part of the excess cost sharing reimbursement. The other 62 are through a different, you don't get the reimbursement, and you're not expecting 4 times the cost.
Correct. And so the other 62, so our parentally placed private school students that maybe are residents or non-residents, that funding actually is a subset of our IDEA grant, and so they get proportionate share funding, and that is just a set rate, and it can be used for specific purposes, and they get an allotment. So it's a much lower annual stipend that families or schools receive. Approximately, it's around $1,200 usually, but because they also benefited from ESSER funds this past year, it was around $1,900 to kind of give you a sense for what that is. And that's what their private school service plan that would be used for their services up to whatever they expend that money.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for that summary. 2 questions. Okay, one, I'm just kind of curious. It sounds as if we're only sending students out. Are we the destination for any students?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we get calls regularly from folks moving from out of the country, from around the country, querying where they should move in West Hartford to attend blank school or to access this type of program for their child. We do have special programs within district and a continuum of services, and we definitely are a destination district. It's not uncommon for folks to move here, and to give you a picture what that looks like in our out of districts, Just this year alone, 7 of our out-of-district students in that number were move-ins to district. They weren't students that were placed out of district by the town of West Hartford that were our students. So they're moving in for those services or already have been placed. And so we're legally required to continue to implement those IEPs.
Jason, did I understand your question to be, though, are we receiving tuition for
Yes,
students who are
that's
out
the
of
question.
district?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Sorry. The destination word maybe threw it off. But, so, do we have students who are outplaced into our district?
There have been times where we've had seats in our district where students who have been have been part of our district and had moved to another district and they've requested to stay, and we've done some tuition-based seats because we are a large district and we often fill our own seats. It's not common, but there have been instances where there has existed.
But it's really small.
It's a very small number.
I see.
Yep.
Okay. The other question I had is, are allergies considered disabilities?
So, not typically. So allergies would,
Yeah.
that's a tricky question in that they're not recognized under IDEA, but
Okay.
if you have a allergy that impacts a major life function, for example, I'm thinking about some skin conditions that are allergy-based that might create school missed days or frequent doctor's visits, or even in some cases hospitalizations. Those students would be eligible under a 504, Section 504 plan, which would be accommodations and modifications. So it could be a disabling factor depending on the severity.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question on, you said that you're going to potentially bring back 26 students out of the 101 that are being placed outside the district. Is that a typical number that you would bring back? Is that a high number? Would that potentially decrease the number of students next year that would be placed outside of the district? Or do you think that, or can you make any kind of a prediction based on those numbers?
I can't make any prediction, but that it's a 23. We're projecting that there will be 23 students that will either age out, graduate, or that we're bringing back to district over the course of next year. I will say that's conservative. We've made really significant efforts in the past year and a half to really bring kids back to district. I think last year we brought back 16, and across this year we brought back a few more. And so it's hard to make predictions because as students come forward and their PPTs make individual decisions, it's possible that more students might be recommended to go out while we're bringing students back, and so the number might be a flush, which is why I'm really tracking those trends to kind of say, who are we welcoming back? Who can we really focus on next year? We've been doing site visits and making sure we know our students and that we have our board certified behavior analysts going out with us. And my colleague and I are continuing to meet with parents and families and students, and when appropriate, making those recommendations for a scaffolded reentry.
I want to say thank you so much for receiving the questions real time. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, moving forward, we have another area of really good news. In the college and career readiness, in both access and in achievement, we're seeing some very good outcomes. So I'll take a moment to explain. Access is students who are enrolled in 2 or more of the following classes. So the AP program, the CTE courses, workplace experience, and dual credit programs like our early college experience program with UConn. And here we see 85% of our 11th graders, which is the second highest performance since the 2013-14 year, are enrolled in at least 2 of those classes. And with our seniors, we have 95.1% of the kids, which is the highest performance in this category ever, of students taking these rigorous courses and these workplace environment courses, which we think is great access for college and career readiness, just as the category suggests. We're also seeing some highs in many of the subgroups if we disaggregate the data to see. In fact, in the 12th grade, this was the highest performance for Hispanic or Latino 12th graders, as well as students eligible for free and reduced price lunch. and the second highest performance ever for Black and African American and students with disabilities. So across the board, the students are really taking advantage of the rigorous coursework and the opportunities, which is something that you would know if you watch a lot of board meetings or listen to a lot of reports from the curriculum office. Has been always a very important measure for us. And similarly, in the achievement category, we've had some really good news too, where we've seen continued growth. And achievement here is demonstrating post-secondary readiness through meeting the SAT benchmark or the ACT benchmark that kids may take on a Saturday, or earning an AP exam score of 3 or higher, or earning at least 3 college credits while in high school. So we have about 2/3 of our students doing that, doing very well, which is also an increase over the last 5 years. Continued great work in these areas of preparing kids for college and career. Now, the performance and accountability measures, this is where you've heard some of the data before in one form or another, because it is reporting often on the state test scores. And we give, certainly we give state tests in grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math, and then in grades 5, 8, and 11, sorry. We also give the SAT in high school. So we give ELA and math in 3 through 8 and 11, and then we give science in 5, 8, and 11. This area also has not only performance, but also how much you're growing, and looks at this data through subgroup lenses as well as overall. And in this category, we do see that ELA scores have been relatively flat. This was reported in the SBAC performance report that you received earlier in the year. We have seen a 5-year trend of falling off a little bit, under 2% in every category. But when we look at the fact that, I do want to remind you that in 2019-20, there were no tests given because of the interruption due to the COVID pandemic. And then in the following year of 2021, we almost reestablished testing again and had no accountability measures that went with it. So in both cases, the state of Connecticut applied for and received waivers from the federal government for both in 1920 for testing and accountability, and then in 2021 for the accountability side. So when we gave the test in 2021 again, it was kind of like resetting after the pandemic, kind of right in the middle of the pandemic and resetting. If you remember, we were doing a hybrid model through approximately February, and these tests are given March and April generally, and sometimes into May. So the fact that we've seen a small drop off through all of that is not a cause for concern that we normally have when we see negatives. It actually is, in many ways, wow, we've maintained pretty well through much of this pandemic. And we see, sorry, one more comment before Paul adds in. We see it both in the high needs and in the non-high needs. So the gaps are staying the same. It's like everyone has come down a little bit through that interruption. I'm very grateful it's not more than where it is. But as you see, the high needs group did fall, but the non-high needs group fell as well. And I'll remind you, high needs are students who qualify as either free and reduced lunch or price meals, students with disabilities, and students who are English language learners. That's your high needs group.
I was just going to remind the board, I believe that when we did our state assessment results, we essentially reported on the percent. One of the things we did to contextualize it was the percentage of rebound following the pandemic, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 95% or in excess of 95%, pretty much across all the various metrics, and so given that this is reporting, 1 year back, that's essentially what you're seeing.
And moving on, and this is going to mirror exactly what Paul just said. So you not only look at your overall performance, but you look at your growth. How are the kids growing? And here we see some of our best growth. So although we've had some fall off, we're also seeing some of our best growth back right away. So we are seeing good increases over the last 5 years, and we believe that this will continue, and our high needs students are coming back at even a faster rate, which is important for us because that was an enormous disruption. It's a little while ago, and sometimes it seems like many years ago, but it really was just 2 school years ago. Interrupted even the little third graders who didn't even ever have a test until 4th grade. It was their first time taking it, and it was a whole year late. So we continue to see good rebound, and we're very happy with that. Oop, I think I missed one. Oh, 4-year graduation rate. Some other good news is one piece of news that we'll keep track of is our undergraduation. We also look at the percentage of our 9th graders who earn 5 credits in 9th grade, because that is a fact. That's an indicator that they're going to be on track to graduate. That actually we saw a slip in this year, and we'll take that under consideration. Why would we have seen that? We did have teachers reporting when kids came back from pandemic, they seemed as though they were just a little less ready to engage. And this is a critical year in 9th grade with the expectations even higher than middle school. If you're a little less ready to engage and you're going into a year where the expectations are just a little bit higher, because high school does come with all of that, that could be part of it. We'll keep our eye on it. That did increase just under 5% from 95 to about 90.5. So we were keeping our eye on that one. The 4-year cohort graduation, students who started who had an entry year of, this is 2022 data, so entry year of 18, who graduated with a cohort 95.1, our highest ever, and increased almost 2% in the last 5 years. So we're already a very high level in these graduation groups, but this was the highest. And our 6-year graduation, cohort graduation rate also. So students who don't make it in the 4, but do they leave you, or do they make it in the 6? And so that was a very high trend as well. In terms of post-secondary entrance and persistence, our entrance level was a little lower than previous years. And that can be disruptive. There's a lot of reasons why students may not choose to go, especially in this kinds of interrupted times. As we know, there was some lag with, am I going to go? Am I going to be online? There was some of that still affecting this class. The good news in that category, though, is persistence. The students who went came again for a second year at a very high rate. So although it did affect some kids in their choice to start in the semester right after high school, the children who went stayed at higher rates. Yes.
And I apologize, Ethan. I did want to mention that college entrance rate, that was a trend that was seen across the state of Connecticut, and I believe nationally, as an impact of the post-pandemic. Excuse me.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, it's on I'm done. I'm just trying to understand, the 6-year graduation rate, is that a subset of the 4.9%? The people who didn't make, the kids who didn't make the 4-year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see the state tracks, in the parentheses there, the state tracks the 6-year cohort graduation rate for the high needs group only, mainly because of the English language learner population and the students with disabilities, who we have the ability to educate past age 18, and that's specific to needs that they may have as a student with disabilities and individualized programming, and or if you think about, if I'm an English language learner and I didn't land in West Hartford for my kindergarten year, I landed in my 10th grade year speaking absolutely no English. We have the ability to educate them if beyond, and so they generally use a 6-year cohort graduation simply to acknowledge the fact that the path for them shouldn't necessarily be expected to be 4.
I'm all good with that. I was just trying to understand how big a percentage it is. I mean, the 95.1, I assume, is the whole population. I assume that...
It's a different class of kids. So this particular 4-year graduation is for the 2021 class, and the 6 years for the students in 2019 who were still in high school.
Oh, okay.
It's a different class of children.
Right.
But it's the smaller cohort of just the high needs group, if that's what you're...
Yeah, originally I thought it was the 4.9 that didn't make the 4-year, but I realized it's a larger population.
Right.
Some that are 4-year, some that are 6-year. Okay. I was Just trying to understand the stats.
No worries. We know you're a stat man. In terms of state testing participation, we're always very strong in this. The state sets a benchmark of we should have at least 95% participation, and that's of course so that you're encouraging all students to participate and not in some way, asking students who may not do as well not to participate. So we're always in the 99%, and again last year I think we were 98.7, or very, very high percentage of participation rates. In terms of physical fitness participation, we continue to strive to increase our physical fitness scores. We have about approximately 70, anywhere from 70 to about 80% of our students hitting each individual benchmark in this particular score, if you remember. I do remember some of this, by the way, I think. Do you remember it? Sit and reach, curl up, push up, and the mile run or the pacer. Do you remember that? We are having approximately in the 70% range of kids meeting any one of those benchmarks, but kids who meet all 4 of those benchmarks are at the 40% level. So a student to meet all 4 has been a higher bar to climb, although individual tests, sit and reach, curl up, push up, and mile run or pacer is much higher. So that's an area of, just overall fitness that we will continue to look at.
And I'll just add, this isn't necessarily one of the statistics that we have chased as a district, mainly because the fitness benchmarks are not a measure of our PE and health program. Our PE and health program certainly includes fitness activities, but it's a composition of wellness, sportsmanship, fitness activities. If we were to change our fitness programs to essentially be to operate like a gym that you might subscribe to, we could chase a higher score, but it's not really, it's not well aligned, and that's a known thing at the state. That's the same is true across all districts in Connecticut, where the standards that the state puts forward for physical fitness and health education aren't the pacer and aren't the
No.
although those are great things. And
what does PACER stand for?
I don't know what the acronym is, but I know what you do.
Yeah.
And the children's, do you want to explain this?
Basically, there's I don't know, we did it outside. I don't know if people do it in the gym. You just go from one side to the other, and you have to make it to the other side before the beep goes off. And each time it gets a shorter amount of time that you have to run across. Yeah, and so you just go, I forget what the number is that you have to reach, but you just go for however many you can.
Yes, it is what it sounds like, right? You're pacing to get across these 2 marks back and forth. And it gets faster, right? Yeah, so that was an alternative to the mile then.
it's still a required component of some form of military fitness testing. It's I forgot the name of it, but it's a separate test that's required for some schools.
I just want to make an apology because my kids can't do pull-ups, so I think we probably brought us down a little bit.
Thank you for that explanation. All right, moving on. So to summarize, many of our highlights are, the work to increase our diversity of our professional staff is forefront in our discussions, and the incremental growth, although we'd like to see it faster, we're glad we're going in the right direction and we'll continue. We're not at all pleased, but we're happy in the right direction. We are very happy with the decrease in suspension and expulsion rates. As Paul said earlier, we brought in the SBD. Although this initiative did not affect these rates, we have continued to look at other ways for alternatives to suspension and expulsion, and we'll continue that next year. Anytime we have record high scores in college and career readiness, we're pleased, and we had such good scores in both 12th grade and 11th this year. And not only in just access, but in achievement, our students are certainly really taking advantage, and that's a really important thing, is to take advantage of the rigorous coursework available. I know Megan is shaking her head because I have a high school student as well, and this is what they're encouraged to do, to prepare themselves as well as they can, as to challenge themselves. Right? we continue to see great growth, and we will continue to look at that as a very important measure because we are still coming back from that pandemic, and as long as we're growing in the right direction, we're going to be pleased. Of course, four-year graduation rate, but it's so heartening to see so many of our subgroups to some of their best outcomes ever. Like outliers, and this is a measure of if your achievement gap is wider than the state's achievement gap in certain measures, we like to make sure that we do not have outliers in that area. And our strong college persistent rates is important, not only because it shows our students' persistence, but that we hope we've prepared them well enough, making the right choices for the right schools, as well as for the academic work, or even the soft skills of asking for help when they need that, going to the professor and doing office hours, or doing all those soft skills like that you see in the vision of the graduate to make sure that they're in a great position to work towards their degree. And with that, we have questions.
Well, thank you so much. We know the questions have been evolving throughout your presentation, but thank you very much for the thorough information shared. Any additional questions? Yes, Renee.
So reflecting back on this report, is there anything that you see that, looking forward, you want to kind of, improve upon? Like, I don't know if there probably wasn't any surprises, but just kind of reflecting back on this year, is there anything you want to kind of look forward to as a goal?
Absolutely. I thank you for that question, because as you go through this report, we actually, Paul does a great job, and I will continue to just track these trends for many, many years. So I had all our tracking trends as well. Then when you see an outlier, especially when you can't necessarily understand it right away. So the chronic absenteeism is something we've already been working on and will be forefront. Some of the steps I can already tell you is the IT department has a product that will actually help us make sure that our communication, now that we know we're communicating with parents, school, come to school, not stay home. We have looked at a product called Logical Attendance that can work into PowerSchool to send automatic letters at certain benchmarks when you hit certain absences. That will make people's lives easier, that we know we're in contact with parents, and they're personalized, they're tracked, we can show them to parents. We also have looked a lot at our data, and that will help us identify. One of the trends I shared was pre-K, K1, those years, a lot of absences. And it could be, again, coming back from the pandemic, worried about your youngster who's maybe seen as a little more fragile than your high schooler. Maybe there was a trend to keep them home. So I know I was talking to the principal of Aiken recently who said, I think right from kindergarten registration on, I'm going to be sending stronger messages than ever, just because I was able to maybe not worry about that in the past, but now that I see the trend. So that's one. Another one that I really want to look at is the 9th grade on-track graduation. That 5 it's a very key indicator of success. I want to understand why we fell off, besides possibly what we're thinking is just a little less schooling for a year and a half made kids a little bit not ready, and then all of a sudden that group was in one of the most rigorous years. 9th grade, earning credits, grades that really count. And they might not have been prepared. I'd like to see if that rebounds this year, or what else we might want to be doing to support our 9th graders. So those are 2 areas that jump off the bat to me.
Claire. Thank you for the detailed report. I'm having trouble understanding the chronic absenteeism chart, and where I see that the total of chronic absenteeism for male-female was 356. But then when you get into the ethnic categories, the Hispanic, Black, and White, it's 320. And then our disabled or the reduced lunch, the English language learners is 352. Are people being marked?
Are you looking at this chart right here?
Yeah. Yeah, so it just seems like a large portion of the chronic absenteeism is the count is very high for the English language learners, free and reduced, and students with disabilities.
Yes, that is true. That is an
I mean, 352. So is that the full? I mean, that's only 4 students less than the male-female.
There is crossover in these categories, though.
Okay.
Those are not individual students. You could be a student with disability and be an English language learner. So I'd have to understand a little bit more and look that up of why, how to count those individually.
Right. but I'm wondering, when you look at that, the disabilities and people who might be experiencing poverty, there might be other reasons.
I think it goes with the more fragile the population might be, the harder the pandemic seemed to hit people. And I think that it didn't hit all groups evenly. People with more resources were able to weather the storm a little bit better. We know that with job losses, with different things, that when sickness, students stayed home to take care of younger children. Some people went to work. There were all kinds of impacts that I think were harder for people who are facing more challenges.
And just because you brought the attention to the table at the bottom of page 1 for chronic absenteeism, I noticed that the male category is asterisked out. That typically means there aren't enough students in a category to represent data. That is clearly not the case. We have nearly 50% students identifying as male in the district. That was a data error that we did report to the state about, and they have not yet been able to repair that for us. So I just wanted to, just bring that to your attention, why there's an asterisk there. Typically, it's anytime you have fewer than 20 students in a category, the data is suspended and they don't report it.
I would say, though, and Paul's absolutely right, when we first saw that, we said that doesn't make any sense to us. There's males are suppressed, the data suppressed. There's hundreds of males. You can't suppress that. But I do want to keep the concern on the forefront, no matter what the state says, because some of our internal data is showing high absentee rates. So it's still, even if this isn't exactly accurate, and we suspect it may not be perfectly accurate, we are seeing, our principals will say there's upticks for all kinds of reasons. Even some simpler reasons, like families didn't take vacations for 2 years, and then when they finally could, they were like, I'm out, sorry, you're going to miss a day of school or something like that, So there were all reasons, but we can hold that a little bit at bay and really better understand it.
Jason.
Sure. Did you have a comment?
No.
No? Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so one area that I found fascinating is the increase in students who identify as 2 or more races. And, this is a kind of, I recognize the need to account for that. At the same time, there seems to be a lack of kind of clarity on what may be within that category and the utility of that category should the number continue to grow, what other kinds of differences might be hidden within a 2 or more category. Just curious, what's your conversation around? I know it's a state-defined category, which it perhaps doesn't have any utility, but from your experience, is that the performances or the numbers coming from that population telling you something about, maybe that there are disparities or differences within that group?
Go ahead. Well, I'll just say that, years ago, there was a certain point where we didn't even have that category.
Yeah, right.
And that is very important to understand. People get the way to identify themselves more clearly, and then it becomes more well-known that you can, because back in 13, 14, it was 3%, now it's 6%.
Yeah.
That's a doubling
Yeah.
in a category, even though very small numbers still. But, that's one factor. There were years where you had to pick. And you picked what best fit you, but now you can, and that word is out. So that's one thing to understand. I'm not sure how else to respond, because every student is so unique, no matter what they identify as. They're all unique kids who bring all different kinds of things with them. I don't think we have any kind of further understanding that we collect from children anyway.
Correct. And I was going to offer the same to begin, that's a newer category that the state has defined, and I think it came from feedback from the public when they had to fit into one box, and they said, my culture is not singular. I have 2 or more cultural, ethnic backgrounds and heritages, and so the state came up with that. It's also self-reported, so and typically filled out more often than not by parents upon registration. So generationally, as people change, they may be reporting, they may be taking greater advantage of that than perhaps they have in the past. But you're absolutely right. As a district, what is the utility of this for us as a tool? It is difficult to know who is behind that number. And the alternative from the state's perspective would be just a myriad of combinations of 2 races, 3 races, 5 races. The state a long time ago, one of the reasons why they moved away from race ethnicity as one of their primary reporting categories and instead have gone to the high needs, essentially saying that if we look instead of at performance based on race, we look at performance essentially based on need, economic need, educational need as it relates to potential learning disabilities or other issues, and then language proficiency needs. And those are the categories where the state, I think, has demonstrated that schools can have utility and target programming, and so it's a very insightful observation, and we'll see where we go with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think the point that you're making about just where do the differences lie, and that that those indicators are the targets for action. Because I identify as 2 or more races, but I walk through the world as an Asian man, and that's people don't see me as 2 or more races. So what is that doing for folks makes me really wonder, and if it continues in that way, do we lose some kind of grasp over how people are moving through the world? Like you said, it's a state issue, but it's something that I try to pay attention to in how it's developing, and I do find that really interesting how people do self-identify in those contexts, and what does that mean for them? It means different things for different people. So, so it's an imprecise indicator. There's actually going to be a conference from the CT Data Hub on Thursday that I'm going to present on similar issues. So there's, even though there are problems with these kinds of accounting measures, they are the bedrock of policy and administration, and doing this is important to do well. So thanks, guys.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you so very much for this very in-depth information. Thank you, thank you. And as we continue on to routine matters, we now will receive our financial report. And we have a recommendation, that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending March 31st, 2023. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second? Thank you, Claire. Is there a second? Thank you, Jason. Discussion, and Claire, you'll be presenting. Thank you so much.
So Ethan and I met last week with Liz and Ann. Overall, the general fund is indicated they'll have a surplus of $25,000 at fiscal end. The salaries are projected to have a 1.2 million surplus at the end of the year, and that's made up of many different things, specifically director salaries and principal and assistant principal salaries. That has been under, but there have been increases in other areas. The paraprofessional salaries is still unfavorable of $225,000, and that's also about not filling those positions. And then this teacher substitutes area for salaries is still, is at 200,000 under, and there's difficulty still in finding subs. But, so overall, the total salaries is expected, is 1.215 thousand. For unemployment compensation, that is still lower than expected. There's less unemployment requests. And then nutrition services, the special education program is going to earn approximately $60,000 in interest income. And the instrument rental and summer program have a $15,000 deficit. Is that correct? Yeah, deficit, okay.
In the special programs fund, those
In the
are.
special programs fund.
Yep.
I jumped ahead of grants. Right now, there's a carry forward of $17 million with the ESSER funds. Those will all, the Title IV grants will be expended. Is it Title IV? Yeah, the Title IV will roll forward, right, this year? Okay. And so we're on track for all the Title I and the IDA. The ESSER funds next year, we have, is it 5,256,000 that will be able to be spent next year for the ESSER funds, the ESSER 3 grant funds. And then for, as we mentioned, are you going to go into more detail about that fund, or did we have enough discussion about the special funds and the McKinney-Bento?
We certainly can talk more about it if you'd like to. On the special program funds report, that's where you will see under our educational services reimbursement program, a use of $500,000 in that reserve. So Gail, that was the one we had talked about previously. I just wanted to make sure you saw that that was something that we do report on every month and are now anticipating having to use those funds in order to balance the current year.
Okay, and then as well, the 100,000 for the transportation that would go to that. And then as far as nutritional services, we are seeing still a increase in the income in that fund because of the free and reduced lunch continuing for this year. There is a March, there'll be a $3,347,000 fund balance, and that is going towards the update of the kitchens, the new dishwasher. There's going to be some walk-in coolers, and we met the staff and the supply challenges, but now we're looking at an upgrade of the Hall and Conard cafeteria counters. There's already been a quote for Hall, and we're waiting on the Conard quote. Any questions? Anything else?
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. And Liz, pardon, I did not acknowledge your presence as well. Thank you so much also.
Of course, and I'm happy to answer any questions or more detail on any of the items we've talked about or any of the items we talked about earlier.
Thank you. Teammates, questions regarding the financial report we have received? Right, seeing none, hearing none, with the motion on the floor to accept the financial report for the period ending March 31st, 2023. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much. Moving on now to approval of the minutes, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of April the 18th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Claire. Any discussion? All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Now on to information and reports. Do we have any board members who would like to communicate anything from which they may be a part of? Seeing none, other information and discussions? Seeing none, before going to future business, I just want to give a shout out. Megan, bless your heart, you are still here. All right, bless you, bless you. Okay, future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, May the 16th, 2023, where we will have our regular Board of Education meeting here at 7 o'clock, room 314, followed by our last Board of Ed meeting of the 2022-2023 academic school year on Tuesday, June the 6th, 2023, 7 o'clock here in room 314. Do we have a request for any future agenda items? Future, oh boy, that was a little Bostonian accent there. Any future agenda items? Yes, Gail.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I just wanted to remind you that I had asked for a couple of agenda items several months ago. And I was wondering if we could get that done before the end of the year. So one was the DESA, have a presentation on the DESA evaluation in the SEL program. And then me and you had discussed about the agenda item regarding a curriculum committee.
Yes, thank you. And do recall those agenda items. And hope with respect to the agenda item on the curriculum committee for SEL, hopeful that what is impending coming up and for the June meeting, that will suffice that piece. Are you looking for something outside of that?
I'm not sure what that is. I'm not talking about a curriculum committee in relationship to SEL.
Okay. So, pardon, I thought you were speaking just about that, a curriculum committee as it relates to SEL.
No.
And with the superintendent's update, sharing about efforts that are coming together with those who have expressed their thoughts and concerns. But you're saying, no, your request is outside of that. So please restate what your piece is. Pardon, I thought it was inclusive of that.
Yeah, no. Me and you had discussed this behind, a little bit privately, but I had asked to have a discussion or have an agenda item about the development of a curriculum committee, not just related to SEL, just sort of in general.
So, pardon, I do recall our conversation, and at that time I also mentioned that that I thought you were speaking about SEL, and I mentioned that I believe an update will be given tonight to update on those pieces. So, from that line of communication, was hopeful that the superintendent's update would speak in favor of wanting to have more of a collaborative process of being aware of the SEL. But hearing you state now that your piece is more of specific to curriculum involvement in general, that piece, that is not the way that I interpreted the request. So thank you for clarifying for that. And so with that, you also had a second recommendation, agenda item regarding DESA, the DESA assessment. I do believe that there are efforts underway to provide just that information. So that specific request has been relayed, has been communicated, and that is underway.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Certainly. Yes.
I just had a question. The calendar, are we going to vote on that? Got deferred.
That's our next meeting. That's an
Perfect.
agenda item for
Okay,
our next meeting.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yes, Claire.
So I'm just curious, is the curriculum similar to what Ethan is proposing with a budget committee or a budget force? I mean, is it math and social studies in every grade level and phys ed and art and music? Is it curriculum in every subject area that you're wanting a committee for?
Well, I'm happy to send out some information that I've sort of researched and collected, but I was trying to do it when we get closer to maybe discussing it. I mean, I don't want to start, I'm happy to discuss it now, but it's kind of late and it was really wasn't on the agenda. I can just say that, about 80% of districts in the state do have a committee that deals with curriculum that's a subcommittee of the Board of Education. And I wanted to discuss what I think might be some of the advantages of that as an agenda meeting, as an agenda item.
All right. So thank you again for clarifying what the ask is. So yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying what the ask is, and more to come with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly, yes. Other suggestions for future agenda items? Seeing none, do we have any comments from visitors? All right, seeing none, we do not have an executive session, therefore seeking a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Ari. Meeting adjourned at 10:04.